For people that have followed this channel, you will know my love of the Renault Clio Sport. Both this, my own 182, but the previous 172 generation as well. For a long time, they've been the cheapest chips, go-to, front-wheel drive hatch. But prices have recently started to go up. And I thought, what a great time to bag yourself one of these Renault Clio Sports while they're still relatively affordable. So this week, I'm doing the Renault Clio Sport Buyer's Guide on my view and top tips to bag one of the very best. Welcome to Fast and Fun. So in this buyer's guide, I'm going to run through four main areas. Outside the car, inside the car, the engine and gearbox, and then the drive itself. I'm going to cover off what I think are the 3 or 4 main parts to each of those areas. But first of all, there's 4 key things that you need to be prepared for when you're looking at a Renault Clio Sport. First one is jargon. Make sure you understand what you're looking at. There's a big difference between the base sport model, the Cup, the full fat, the trophy, the 172 phase 1, the phase 2, the 182, all these terms, comments, you need to understand the car that you are looking for. So my first tip is do your research. There's lots on YouTube, there's lots on social media, there's lots on the internet. Find out and understand what each of the variants are. Second point is, historically these cars have been cheap as chips. And as a result of that, and the base cost of some of these cars a few years ago, you could have probably picked one up for about £1,000. Now, although those days have long gone, people did buy them. And because they were so cheap, they were almost used, abused, potentially neglected. And that is going to lead to problems for future owners downstream. So there is an awful lot of tap there. A lot have been neglected. A lot will have been abused. Owners will have either not been able to afford it or just didn't care about maintaining the car as well as it should have been. So take real care. The Clios, because of the cheapness of the cars, are really prone for health warnings associated with the poor quality that is going to be out there on the marketplace with some of these cars. So what you want to do, if you can, is get one with full service history, or if that's not possible, because there's not going to be many around now after 20 or so years that's got full service history, get one with at least as much history as you can get. The third point is modifications. Because these cars were cheap, because they were affordable, because they were fast, because they were fun cars, they were prime for modification. For track cars, for young guys wanting to heavily modify these cars, all these changes can actually remove some of the great qualities that the Renault Clio Sport had in regard to its chassis and its really rev-happy type of engine. So just expect modifications on a lot of these cars. Personally, hunt one out that's standard or as close to standard as possible. And the final point is, if you're thinking about detailing these cars, they are not easy cars to live with on a day-to-day basis. These are 20-year-old French hot hatches with potentially unreliability, niggles, problems, as you'd expect of a cheapest chips French hot hatch to have. And they are far from perfect. It's well publicised about the high driving position. It's known that the interior is of poor quality. The gearing on these for A roads and motorways is appallingly so low geared that if you want to sit at 70 on the motorway, you're 3,500, 4,000 RPM, it can become quite tiresome. So if this is your daily, you really need to consider whether this is the right car for you. So they are the sort of 4 starters. What I'm going to do now is we're going to take a look at some key points from the outside of the car. The first thing I'd say about the Clio is colour. Colour on many sports cars doesn't drive much in regard to values. Slightly more for some colours, slightly less for others, but largely it's not a driving factor. For the Clios, that's not the case. There is a clear hierarchy in colours and desirability, with at the bottom of the rung is the silvers and my black gold. And then in the middle sit the blues, and there's various different shades of blue. And then near the top, you have above the blues, you have the Infernos, which are much rarer. And then right at the top is the liquid yellows. In fact, the liquid yellows, you almost need to sell a kidney to be able to afford one of those. It doesn't mean that a well cared for, looked after black gold can't be more expensive than an Inferno that's been used and abused. However, it is a significant factor and it can influence the price of the car, especially on the Infernos and the liquid yellows. What else? Well, from the outside, the bonnet's aluminium and is very susceptible to stone damage. And the front bumper and the wings are plastic. So they'll suffer no type of rust, etc. or damage, but just be aware when you're looking round what they are. They are very flimsy and lightweight. It doesn't mean rust isn't an issue though. It absolutely is, as it is on most cars that are 15 or 20 years old. And the big one is in most cases is under the sills. And the difficulty with the Clio is because of this quite heavy truncated lower sill, getting access to it's difficult. So what you really need to do is park it almost on a curb so you can get under, or get a jack and get under and prod around and feel around the inner sill. And it's the same with the rear wheel arches. Again, really prone areas. They're not deal breakers, but the problem is with rust, whatever you can see is only the tip of the iceberg, and actually it can lead to much, much more cost than you ever imagined. So the best thing to do is find one that's clean and tidy and doesn't need the work in the first place. And then the other one from the external, as well as general wear and tear, is tyres. Tyres is a really, really big giveaway. This car, the Clio Sports, are renowned for their chassis and their handling. That's why you're buying this car for. If you arrive and the tyres are not of a premium sports brand, walk away. If the tyres are mix-matched, 3 different types of tyre out of the 4, walk away. If any owner is driving one of these cars on anything other than the best premium sports tyres possible, then for me it means that if they're not only cutting corners there, they'll be cutting corners elsewhere, because this is what you buy a Clio Sport for. They have to be on premium sports tyres, ideally Michelin Pilot Sport 3s. They're absolutely fantastic on this type of car. Big clue, big giveaway, tyres. Next up is the engine and gearbox. Well, the big thing about the engine and the big drive of the engine is the cam belt. It's officially due at 6 years or every 72,000 miles. Most owners' clubs now recommend that the cam belt is done every 5 years, and it is a big job. You're looking at £850, £900 for a cam belt on one of these. And the reason is because access is really, really tricky. It's shoved down between the edge of the engine and the front wing, and there's no space. They've got to undo the engine mounts and try to lever it out of positions just to gain access. And that's because they've shoehorned this 2 litre into this small little hatchback. So cam belt's a big cost. So if it's not been done, plan for it to be done every 5 years. Otherwise, the engine is actually really robust. It does idle a little bit lumpy, it's a little bit rough at times, but that's because of the lightweightness of the car itself and having such a big 2 litre engine in such a lightweight car. The biggest issue with the engine after the cam belt is just neglect and abuse. So again, having the service history, having the proof, the evidence, the oil receipts, whatever it may be, even if it's a home mechanic's done it, has he got receipts from the filters, the oils, to prove, to show you that the engine has been looked after? You really need that, because that's when these engines start having problems, when there's been a lack associated with maintenance and servicing of these cars. Gearbox wise, again, pretty okay. Just listen out for crunching gears, reverse, second, thirds, etc., where synchros might be out on the way out. If they are, again, you need to budget for that. But otherwise, again, the gearboxes are pretty robust with these cars. The dipstick, what a location they've fitted it. Right down there, you can just see the red handle of it. It's about, I don't know, 8-10 inches down, the smallest gap possible, and it's ideal not for getting your hand grubby and dirty. Yeah, say no more about French Renault engineers when they designed that dipstick. And then on the inside of the car, well, the first thing eminent on every single Clio Sport is the melting steering wheel. Well-known issue. I've driven this car, you can see mine's badly melted. On a hot sunny day, if it's coming through, if the sun's beating down through the windscreen, this will get tacky. So tacky that when you take your hands off the steering wheel, they're covered in black. So easily retrimmed, about £200, and you get your steering wheel retrimmed. They will all be the same unless they have been trimmed. The centre dash, it is cheap French plastic. It's of a low quality. It does feel tacky and sticky, similar to the steering wheel. Why Renault used materials like that, I do not know. But again, it's worth having a look through. Again, standard, if you can get one, is probably better, but just expect it's not being neglected and abused if it's like that. They're all like that. The seats. These seats are actually quite nice. They're sort of half suede, half Alcantara, a little bit of leather in there. They're soft, they're squidgy, but they're still supportive. But they do and can suffer around the stitching. If they've not been looked after, expect this stitching to be coming undone, okay? Cuts, fag burns, rips, tears. Give the seats a really, really thorough inspection. Again, it just gives you an indication how the car's been looked after. Normally, the rear seats should, in most cases, be almost immaculate, because for most people, they're just not used. And then the final tip, specifically to the Clio again, is water ingress, but not from outside, although that can be an issue in the boot and on the rear lights. It's specifically around the air conditioning. So front and rear, just lift up the mats, check around, make sure it's all nice and dry in there with regard to the carpets, because if it's not, you may have a problem with the aircon dumping water inside the car. On the test drive itself, there's a few key important things. One is on the dash, make sure there's no lights. The Clio is renowned for throwing up warning lights and electrical gremlins. I've had mine a couple of years. I've only done 2,000 or 3,000 miles in it, and I've had, I think, 3 issues in the couple of thousand miles I've had it. Fuel injectors, ABS sensors, rear lights, etc. When you drive, it is a 20-year-old French hatchback, and it rattles, it squeaks, there's knocking. It's not a comfort, it's not an easy place to live on a day-to-day basis with regard to ride quality, noises, vibrations, etc. You can feel the thump of that 2-litre in. Get this car, it's only just over 1,000 kg, lightweight car, and you can feel that. With regard to the engine, there should be a really pull of that engine. It should be linear pull up to about 5,500 revs. When you hit that level, you should feel a distinct kick then, as a 16 valve really opens up, and suddenly there's a kick all the way past 7,000, and that is when this car is on fire. So make sure you can feel the kick, make sure you rev it out to beyond 7,000. And finally, values. So these prices now are bottoming out at about £2,000. for the cheapest, probably most abused examples that were, a few years ago, going for as little as £1,000. The mid-range now of Renault Clio Sports that were sat probably, again a few years ago, at 2,000 to 3,000, and now more like 3,000 to 5,000. But then, if it's the right colour, with low mileage, good service history and in great condition, we're seeing Clio Sports going for up to £10,000. And that's not including the ludicrously expensive and special trophies that are mostly now sat around the mid-teens. In fact, there's one today that I saw at over £20,000. I don't expect massive price increases in these, but what I do expect is they become rarer and fewer on the road, and that's a real shame, because these cars have never been built again. These were the last of the generation. Lightweight, 1,000 kilo, hot hatch with a great stonking 2 litre shoehorned into the front of it, with a chassis as brilliant as it is. It really is a car that will live, for me, long in my memory, and that's why I want to keep it. I want to keep it, to use it, to remember what it was like. It was reminiscent of the 80s and 90s hot hatches. And my view, my comment, my recommendation to you guys now is get in now, experience what these cars are like. For all their faults, put this down a B road and you'll have as much fast and fun as in any other car. I hope you enjoyed this quick, short buyer's guide into the Renault Clio Sport. And as always, if you did, thumbs up, subscribe down here somewhere, and stay tuned. Another video next week. Thanks for watching.